Hi, good day to you all. Welcome back to SPE Live and this Gaia talk on the energy transition. Very glad you are all joining us here today. We have a great show lined up for you. As we kick off, a big thank you to our sponsor, SPE Foundation, whose sponsorship makes SPE Live partly possible. So as I said, SPE Live today is going to take a good long look about the much talked about energy transition. Oil and gas 2050, innovation and sustainability. That's what we're talking about today. So where are we as a global population in this energy transition? We are impacted by COVID-19, economic recession, low oil prices, but the world needs energy and more energy as we progress. Now, before we start, in a post about today's SPE Live, I did a little poll asking about the energy transition benefits. Does it benefit all of us equally? Is oil and gas history? Mass electrification the future? Those are the questions I asked, so you can go and check my poll out on LinkedIn if you wish and participate. I had all of 16 people so far graciously answer, so a large statistical meaningful survey, as you can see. But of those 16, 25% say green energy saves the planet, 56% say oil and gas stops energy poverty, 6% say hydrogen is the future, a very small percentage, and 13% say humans are sustainable. So if you want to have fun, provoke us a little, go and check out that poll. And by all means, as with all SPE Lives, please tell us where you're from, ask questions, share your thoughts on the energy transition, ask questions of our great panelists that we have today. If you want to check out other SPE Lives, you'll find it on spe.org. This and other SPE Lives are available on demand for free. So joining me here today to answer questions from you, our wonderful audience, and other big questions about the oil and gas in the energy transition, we have Mark Finley. He is Fellow in Energy and Global Oil at the esteemed Baker Institute Center for Energy Studies. He's an energy economist and thought leader with 30 plus years of experience and a global reputation for insightful strategic analysis of energy markets, advising the leadership of multinational companies and governments. Expert in connecting trends in US and global economics, geopolitics, and technology to the world of energy. Prior to his current position, he's had 17 years at BP in global energy markets and 13 years in the US government as energy market analyst and manager. Joining Mark is Fiji George. He's Director, Climate and Sustainability at Cheniere Energy. Has more than 25 years experience related to energy, environmental and sustainability issues spanning natural gas production, processing, transmission, and LNG. His expertise focuses on identifying sustainable solutions for prudent development and use of natural gas in a low-carbon economy, including development of internal and external sustainability policies, programs, and research. Prior to Cheniere, George held positions at Southwestern Energy, Shell Exploration and Production, and El Paso Corporation. Also on the guest list today is Josh Etkind. Josh is Shell Gulf of Mexico Digital Transformation Manager, has a background in subsurface wells, innovation, sustainable development, and major project delivery. Josh has held previous roles as Shell Manager, North America Deepwater Decommissioning and Restoration, and also Digitalization Lead for Subsurface Gulf of Mexico. He has just finished a 2-year term as president of SEAS, that's the Shell's US employee resource group focused on sustainable development. And outside of work, Josh serves as CEO of Sanitation for All, an international NGO focused on helping disadvantaged communities gain access to clean water. And finally, on the panel today, David Reid, CTO and CMO at National Oil Well Varco, NOV, where he has worked for a incredible 28 years. Describes himself as a growth catalyst, I think is an understatement, for business, products, teams, people, and culture. Unique business and technology leader, skilled at motivating large groups, technology strategy, market development, new business models, leadership growth, and all forms of development. He says, my goal have kept me driving towards roles that are pioneering and fun for myself and the people I take with me. So, that is our guest today. Gentlemen, welcome. Great to see you all.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So, the energy transition, is it chaotic? Is it a transition, a reduction, or an addition? There was a great article circulating today on LinkedIn by Axios talking about renewable growth. So, that's part of the background that we want to talk about today. So, climate change, UN, SDGs, energy poverty, sovereign wealth, and the right to exploit natural resources. And all these big announcements by big oil like BP, potentially leaving oil and gas, kind of conflicts with the huge prolific oil and gas discoveries that we have currently going on, Suriname, Guyana, Brazil. So that's an interesting mix in the whole big puzzle of energy transition, right? Many people ask, is hydrogen the answer? And then we have the other flip side of that is all the electrification and the mass mining operations that we need for the batteries that we need to power cars, solar and wind. And then on top of all that, we have COVID-19. So a very, very fluid environment that we're in. So Mark, we'll start off with you. Can you paint us a picture, please?
You bet. Thank you, Niels. I appreciate the invitation, and thanks to you and the SPE team for organizing, what I'm sure is going to be a great conversation. I'd like to start by just offering a few kind of scoping remarks to help put some of our conversation in context. Aisha, may I please have the first exhibit? So as we think about transitioning the world's energy system to a more sustainable basis, one thing I think we always need to keep in mind is that there's a very strong relationship between energy and quality of life. This chart shows, this is a chart prepared by BP, showing the relationship between per capita energy consumption and Human Development Index prepared by the United Nations. Here in the US and in Europe, we tend to forget about this dimension of sustainability because we're way over on the right-hand side of this chart where there isn't much of a relationship between more energy and better quality of life. But it's always important to remember that 80% of the world's population is over on the left-hand side of this chart. That is, that they're in that zone of their economic development and access to energy where there's a very strong positive correlation. And as people around the world seek a better quality of life, there's a need for more energy to fuel that, and we need to always keep that in mind as we think about an energy transition and sustainability. May I have the next exhibit, please? So the question is, well, where's the world's energy system going? And the honest answer is nobody knows. If anybody tells you they know, they're making it up. What I'm showing you here is 3 different scenarios prepared by the International Energy Agency in Paris. The one on the far right is where we are today on the momentum case of the current policies around the world. The one in the center is a scenario that is fully consistent with meeting the UN's Human Development Goals. And I think I'd point out a few key things on this chart. One, if you look at oil, which is the red here, in 2040, there's nearly a 100% range between the central case, the Sustainable Development case, and the current policies case. So massive uncertainties here, and that's just for oil. But I'd also point out a couple of other things. First of all, the system changes slowly. Also, that getting onto a more sustainable pathway, as Niels mentioned at the beginning, would require a dramatic change from anything we've ever seen in history. Niels mentioned the piece published by Axios today based on work by the Resources for the Future think tank that shows that in history, we've never actually reduced our consumption of any form of energy. We've only ever consumed more. And as various fuels have gained and lost market share, it's not because any of them have been falling. Rather, it's because they've been growing at more or less rapid rates. A final thing to point out here is if you look at that central case, again, in a case that is consistent with meeting the Sustainable Development Objectives, oil and gas are still nearly half of the world's energy mix by 2040. And that points to a need for continued investment in the sector, especially given the decline rates that many of you are very well familiar with in the current base of production for oil and gas. May I have the next exhibit, please? So in the face of all this uncertainty, what are we supposed to do? And I think for both business and for policymakers, the answer is you have to be flexible and keep an open mind because we don't know which technologies are going to prevail. This chart is showing how we get CO2 reductions onto a sustainable pathway in the IEA's sustainable development scenario, and where they're best shot at it based on what they understand the technologies and costs to be today. But again, it points to the need for an all of the above type of mindset. Who wins? No one will know. If you can predict where the technology is going, let me know. But I think in my experience, the answer is set up an open playing field and let everything compete, using market-based mechanisms to see which technology option or options offer the low-cost solutions for society. And of course, given where we are today, final exhibit, please. Thank you, Aisha. We can't, whoops, I missed one. That's where I want to be. Thank you, perfect. We can't avoid discussing the COVID pandemic. We are looking at potentially the biggest decline in global energy demand in most of our lifetimes, certainly the biggest since World War II and the Great Depression, as you can see on this chart. The decline in energy demand is especially concentrated in oil because all of the policies to deal with the pandemic have been to lock down transportation, which is still oil driven. Now, and by the way, we've not just seen the biggest drop in demand that we've ever seen, we've also seen the biggest coordinated production cuts, at least for oil supply, by OPEC and a group of cooperating countries. So my final point would just be, how does the COVID pandemic impact the energy situation going forward? Again, it's too soon to tell, but the key things that I'm watching is, what does it mean for economic growth going forward? What does it mean for potential impact of green stimulus measures that we're seeing adopted in many places, especially in Europe? What are the prospects for durable change to consumer behaviors in terms of their attitudes toward travel, et cetera? Those are some of the key variables that I'm watching as I think about the potential impact of COVID and how it plays into this sustainability discussion.
Oh, thank you, Mark. That's a great picture you just painted there. So very, very informative. Opening up to you others to make some comments and paint some more color to that picture that Mark just painted. Fiji, do you want to say some words about the sort of midstream LNG gas market impact?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So Fiji, George with Cheniere, as Niels and Mark have outlined the overall transition pathway potentially that can happen. We've got to look at it from 5 lenses, and some of this is what Mark just touched. First is human progress is directly correlated with energy consumption, and there's a great Brookings paper that came out in last year that basically said around 1.7 billion people are going to move from poverty to the middle class by 2030. That's a huge number, and that's predominantly in Asia. The second aspect is we all feel this, and we all understand now that climate change is happening around us. And the scientists have concluded that about 1 degree of warming has happened since pre-industrial time. And recent surveys have also acknowledged that people are recognizing this fact even more. And the politicians, of course, they're the lacking indicator to most of these things. The Paris Accord was one way to get that, but we understand the issues that are and the challenges that are afforded by that. The UNEP has indicated that CO2 emissions have to fall by 25% over the next decade to keep the 2-degree pathway. So the challenges are there. And then the third aspect that I would focus is energy, and this is a point that Mark mentioned. Energy transition takes decades to happen. 80% of the current global demand is met by fossil fuels. And if you look at it from the emissions perspective, coal accounted for 40%, oil about 34%, and gas at 20%. And the decarbonization strategies have predominantly focused on how do we electrify the grid? How do we get more EVs in place? And this is a big challenge. And Morgan Stanley had a paper recently talked about the challenge is approximately $50 trillion have to be spent to make the alignments consistent with the Paris goals. That's a huge amount of money and huge amount of effort that is needed. But one fact is, natural gas is still providing 25% of the primary energy demand, even in a 2-degree environment. And renewables, especially modern renewables, when we talk about modern renewables, I mean wind and solar, are approximately 2% of the overall pie. Now, history has shown that every modern energy sources takes about 15 to 20 years to capture about 10% of the global supply. So the challenge of the transition to quote unquote a greener economy is significant, and not including the challenges posed by renewable energy with intermittency and so on. So those are challenges, but as Samantha Gross, who wrote a great article this weekend on the energy transition, these challenges result in engineers finding solutions. So there are solutions for these and for certain sectors that have challenges like the steel and ammonia and cement. And the fourth challenge from a midstream perspective is especially natural gas remains a crucial energy source in any realistic outlook. And natural gas, the coal to gas switching has happened. IEA shows that over 500 million tons of CO2 reductions have happened since 2010. So gas has a foundational role to play. And I'll close with those 5 points for now.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Fiji. That's a really good additional information there. I had a great comment from Beatrice Adriana Argumedo Uribe. Thank you. She says, which economies are better prepared to make energy transitions, which are more advanced? Both to Mark and Fiji's points there. So, Josh, can I bring you in maybe to add some more color, and maybe sort of address what Beatrice was saying there?
Absolutely. You know, I think there's a good quote: "In the middle of every difficulty lies an opportunity." That's something that Albert Einstein was said to have said. I believe that people that have come to this particular session are here because they're drawn to this topic. They're compelled to make a positive difference in the world and create a future that they want, rather than just be passive sort of onlookers. So I just wanted to address the agents of change in the virtual room. And I think we have a really incredible challenge on our hands. It affects every one of us. It affects future generations, and in fact, life on Earth. So, you know, we happen to be living at a time, though, that we actually can have an influence on how these things play out. So the way I see this, there's several societal mega trends that are playing out that are sort of supercharged by the COVID-19 pandemic. So you have a sustainability revolution that it has the magnitude of the industrial revolution and the speed of the digital revolution. So that's actually a quote from Vice President Gore, former Vice President. So I wanted to unpack that for a minute. What do we mean by sustainability revolution? I think this is something that starts with a broadening awareness of how each and every one of our actions affect the global ecosystem, both at the individual level, at the national level, at the corporate level, and it's informed through the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And then this is at the magnitude of the Industrial Revolution. So that means that every single link in the value chain has to play their part to enable a just energy transition. And it has to be at a pace that meets the Paris Agreement and keeps us within 1.5 degrees C temperature rise. So the oil and gas industry, the energy industry at large, we have a particularly important role to play. We have so much to do with providing the energy that people need, with the chemical feedstocks, the supply chains. We have an outsized impact on the ecosystem. So, you know, oil and gas professionals, I'd say, bring a lot to the table here that has to do with their technical capabilities, their systems thinking, the deep knowledge of how our global economy is fueled, how it's run. And finally, this is at the speed of the digital revolution. And so my current role has a lot more to say about this particular point. And so what we're seeing in this space is there's a confluence of three things that I'll just touch on quickly. It's the elastic cloud computing. You have big data, you have AI, machine learning, and of course, all the sensors that bring in that big data on the Internet of Things. So, the point I'd make here is that, we do have a chance to address this. And I think that, we're seeing impacts across ecosystems, across our governments, across the ecosystems where we work. So I think the only real way that we can move forward is broad sectoral collaboration and recognition that the consumer has to be supported in making more informed decisions every day. So I think a lot of this really comes down to human factors. It's not all about technology.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point that you made at the end there about that innovation and sustainability and impacting ecosystems. David, do you want to pick up from here?
Yeah.
Natural market dynamics. How do engineers innovate in this space?
Well, I think for all engineers, what they do really well with is any kind of challenge or problem, and this is huge opportunity, particularly for the type of people that we are in our industry. So I was drawn in from another industry into our industry, and what is exciting is challenges, and I've watched us do incredible things very fast as an industry for the size that we are. In my career, we went out to 10,000 feet. It was an impossible task that a government organization was trying to do, drill at 10,000 feet. It took them 7 years from the beginning of their need to the end of actually going out and doing the project. 2 years in, we had built drill ships and we're out there doing things that we were talking to people in NASA about, subsea control from the surface at 10,000 feet. Mission to Mars, people thought we were crazy what we were trying to do. We have this ability to solve problems really fast. Sometimes we feel we're very slow, but when we have need and we have challenge and opportunity, we drive. And I think it's a great time for us because the crisis, it is causing us to focus. It's causing us to be open to new opportunity. And here we have being much more responsible with what we have is an opportunity, but also starting to apply our technologies. I know for us at NOV, we're designing the systems to install offshore wind farms, and that really is something that is just a jackup. It's something we already did. We just changed the design a little bit, and I think this is going to be true overall. Is there are things that we've done, and we look at it across the various fields, and say there are things we can do now that really we can do better. And there's opportunity there where we just need to focus and drive, and that focus and drive is here because I really think this is more an age group of people who feel the burden of the future, as well as parts of the world where change has been happening, where culturally they've moved, and so that's all there. So with doing what we do already better, we've needed that. We've needed efficiency. There's things I've seen where we weren't as focused as we should have been. And of course, that is a business challenge. As long as this has a business aspect, we're going to do really well. And so that in itself, then taking our technologies into the field of renewables and applying them, as well as there's room for innovation in their space. I know around 7 years ago, we had a consultant come in to talk to our emerging leadership class, and he was from renewables. And he just begged us. It was a fascinating. First of all, he was shocked to see the talent in the room as he got to know us, and said, "I always thought of you as behind the times in this archaic industry. To know that you're so innovative and you're so global and you're fast and intuitive." And he said, I need you." He basically did a plea in his speech saying, "Our industry is government based. We're slow. We're like our EPC companies, where the projects become very complex and very heavy and burdensome, and they don't get the business right. And they're desperate for innovation. They need us to think of, new ideas and push them because we have a level of agility we think we don't have that we really do have. Because when we have a challenge, we can put ourselves to it, and when there's opportunity, we move into it. So I think this is very exciting times for us. As I hear more and more of the companies in our space saying, okay, we're going to do more about this, and you're going to keep seeing it. We're going to keep inventing, and we're going to keep pushing, and the pressure on our industry is going to cause us to push over. So I'm very excited about the opportunity for engineers and for people to think differently, and for us to facilitate a lot of this change.
Thanks, David. So yeah, so he's describing there that opportunity for the oil and gas engineers to participate in this. It's a multi-layered cake, right? I mean, it's many layers. We have to supply the world with energy because of the energy demand, yet we also face pressures about our role in the sustainable future. You know, and you mentioned the focus and drive and age groups that feel the burden about doing something and having an impact. Mark, maybe you want to take up some of those threads there.
Yeah, I think that you know, I mean, Fiji, Josh, and David have all raised great points, and as a non-engineer, I've always been in awe of the creativity, you know, that I see brought to problem solving, you know, by our industry and by your profession. In my experience, you know, what it takes to do that is you need systems that channel and harness and provide space for that creativity to happen. You know, people work toward their incentives. I mean, one way to provide an incentive for this transition as an economist is to put a price on carbon, you know, which provides a basis for revealing, you know, what are the creative competitive solutions. The other thing that the system needs is scale. Yeah, and that is something the oil and gas industry is spectacular at. You know, we produce, you know, and get to market 100 million barrels of liquid hydrocarbons every single day. And so to me, you know, the opportunity and the challenge is to have systems that, you know, provide the opening for this creativity and innovation to take place and harness it under incentives, and then to scale it.
I'm on mute. That doesn't help. So, yeah, we're kind of like in this dilemma, right? You know, we can affect change. We are a major supplier of global energy. We in the oil and gas industry thrive in this free market economy. So that's one of our strengths, as Mark just said. You know, does it help with scale? Well, that does help with scale, and CO2 pricing would help that impetus. And then on the other side, we have, you know, just this pressure of sustainability. So where is the innovation that we, as David, you picked up on this, but apart from the drive and the determination, what kind of innovations can we bring to the table from our perspective to help the sustainability pathway?
Well, there's plenty. I mean, we certainly have moved into and driven by Norwegian operators, but moved into efficient systems where we're looking at. Yeah, we were already doing this on most of our drawwork systems, where you're using the load that basically works like a hybrid braking system. So instead of turning the energy of braking into heat, we convert it and hold it and use it as a returned energy. And so we do that already, and we're doing it in more and more cases now, where we're looking at efficiency of systems. And there's some simple upgrades that you can do to systems to just get better at that storage and use area, because we do use an intensive amount of fuel. And we had an industry challenge in that those who built the rigs didn't pay for the fuel. It was a simple business problem, right? And so their motives were not there. And so that's a change that's starting to happen as we get, okay, let's look at efficiency and use of fuel. So I think that's a huge area where we have technology we can move into right now that can pay for itself. And that's one of the great things when you look at efficiencies, is that they're business drivers too. You know, it's just the business model wasn't working for us the way it was. And so those are simple steps that I think we'll see everywhere, that we just learn how to be more efficient in our systems. Our hydraulic systems, we have a eco booster that allows you to you know, not be ramping up and down and using that energy inappropriately, but having stored energy that you can use. I mean, there's just a lot of clever, simple things across all systems that have a cost but can be paid for. So I think that's a simple one inside of our environment, and understanding efficiencies as a carbon impact, you know. And so there's lots of things we have where we have technologies that run efficiently. Most interestingly is automation. And I think that gives us a wide space of what if we didn't all get on choppers and all drive to rigs. What if we, we're much more efficient with how we ran people to and from jobs? I mean, this is the COVID, the beauty of COVID moment, where everyone who had a barrier to video conference, which not new, just a lot of people didn't turn the camera on, or didn't use it. I mean, we still have people using these systems as if where they don't have the camera on because it's just they're not comfortable. But generationally, once again, we have a generation who's very comfortable with seeing their own face nowadays, and so that changes a lot. So I think that's pushing in this openness to automation and remote work. So I think that has a huge impact on our performance when it comes to carbon footprint.
Thanks, David. So yeah, definitely efficiency and, as you say, automation. So to Mark's earlier slides, 37% can be saved in CO2 output through efficiencies. So Fiji, talk to us a little bit about what kind of efficiency gains, operational efficiency gains, we can impact us from the gas perspective and midstream.
Sure. So, Niels, let me look at efficiency in a little different way from an engineer standpoint, right? Output by input. So, and from the lens of methane emissions, which is in IEA's vernacular the fifth pillar in reductions. So, IEA estimates approximately 82 million tons of methane emissions from oil and gas operations annually are emitted. That's approximately 145 billion cubic meters, or about 5% of the global consumption. So if we start thinking about it in an efficiency lens, the IEA predicts or projects or estimates about 3/4 of this total emissions can be reduced, and 1/3 can be done at no cost. So that is the low-hanging fruit for all of us in the industry. Methane emissions. And IEA in the recent report as part of the COVID crisis, they put some numbers to this. They said $5 billion of spending could mobilize these reductions, the no net cost, and would end up saving approximately $10 billion per year. And in terms of employment, the global population, global employment population in the oil and gas sector is approximately 13 million from the upstream to distribution segments. They anticipate about 4 jobs for every $1 million spent on these methane reduction opportunities. So this is a perfect example of methane being a high global warming gas, low cost reduction opportunities with known technologies at almost net zero cost. And it's a classic example of no-brainer and why we should promote such reduction technologies on the methane side to improve the delivery efficiency of oil and gas globally.
Oh, thank you, Fiji. So, yeah, efficiencies in delivery systems. So I'm wondering, we've had several questions coming up from the audience. So one from Bob Pearson earlier, how can LNG-based power be delivered to impoverished sub-Saharan Africa? And another one by Enoch Basilio, how do you think COVID-19 has affected plans for the energy transition in developing countries? So, a lot of what we're talking about, these innovations, technology opportunities, they are really sort of first world country benefits that they enjoy. So the energy transition is very unequal from country to country. So how do we innovate and bring sustainability and energy transition to developing countries? They have very different needs. Josh, let's start with you first, perhaps.
Yeah, thank you. So there's an initiative going on with SB called the Gaia initiative, and it's a sustainability focused sort of consortium of many different sister societies. We have IEA involved, IOGP, numerous others, and we're bringing a lot of folks together to the table. And some of the principles that we talk about through this initiative are around mobilizing, engaging, aggregating, and collaborating. And this is for broad sort of collaboration across many different aspects. But one of the focus areas, of course, is around, what are we proud of, and where do we find something to really get excited about in this energy transition? Maybe something different for every single person. It may be indeed that there are some billion people or so that are living in energy poverty right now. And so we can take great pride in the industry's role that we've had, over the many decades in the past, to provide heat, light, and mobility to people, but also to recognize that there's a great opportunity to expand that coverage and bring more energy to more people around the world. And you look at the sort of scale and cost sort of drives that are being seen, for instance, in the LNG import arena, or in basically disconnected sort of energy systems that use renewables and so forth. But there's a lot more that we can do here as well. I think that we're seeing it in Australia, and we're seeing it in many other places around the world, where providing a bit of backup power with batteries can really change the system. And I think, as far as innovation goes, one of the biggest opportunities for us is, of course, to create scaled energy storage. And so this would be at grid scale. It would be long-term energy storage. And if you can find ways to move energy over the seas, from places where we produce it to places that need it, then that really changes the game entirely. And of course, you have to ask the question, like, why can't we just produce the energy where it's needed? And that's an even bigger opportunity. But I think I'll add to this a bit, that there may be other inspirations that bring people to the table. And so it may be around improving air quality, knowing that air quality in its current state may be trimming off 1.8 years of lifetime from existing generations. It's estimated to be even worse than smoking for you. And maybe if that's not something that's inspiring, maybe it's the impact on biodiversity. The destruction, degradation, and fragmentation of habitats. So there's probably over 1 million species today out of the 8 million that are threatened with extinction. So this is 10 times to 10,000 times higher than the background rate. So maybe that's not an inspiration for you. Maybe it has something to do with deploying renewables and finding ways to ramp up that aspect of the energy system. Maybe it's reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but maybe why would we do it? Well, it could kind of touch on the points brought up earlier around saving money. So leak detection and repair, it's getting cheaper by the day. We have public satellite data available now for us to see leaks across our value chain. And by the way, we're not the only ones that can see that. It's publicly available, so the public can see it as well. So there's a lot of transparency being added here. And doing things as simple as replacing high bleed pneumatic valves with no bleed valves. This is controllers. This is something that pays off, within a year. And maybe that's not important to you. Maybe it's just about money and financing. Well, you see, the finance industry is also stepping in, and if we don't clean up our act, we'll lose access to financing and low interest rates to support our capital investments. So in my mind, I guess what I'm seeing is that all the incentives align. There's something in this for everyone.
Oh, thanks, Josh. Yeah, so very good points there. Incentivization by market pressures, financial pressures, small step changes being very effective. That goes back to those earlier observations about 30% efficiency gains, and what Fiji was saying also about methane flaring. Fiji, go back to you. What are some of the aspects? I mean, there's a new World Economic Forum article on gas in Africa. Can you say a little bit about that, perhaps, in terms of efficiency and energy transition?
Yeah, so the article that Niels just is mentioning is by Todd Moss and Mark Turba, and this was printed or published late last month. And the article's title is 12 Reasons Why Natural Gas Should Be Part of Africa's Clean Energy Future. And it goes through a variety of reasons why, and it starts off with a lot of points that we made. Access to energy, the mortality associated with substandard access, and the fact that the Africa's energy demand is huge and enormous, and it's going to double by 2040 because of rising incomes, urbanization, and so on. And then also, remember, Africa has got a lot of plentiful gas reserves in multiple countries. And this is Nigeria, Mozambique, Ghana, Senegal have got a lot of reserves within them. So they go to the authors, Todd Moss and Mark Tuber, go through the reasons why gas should be fundamental. It aligns quite well with the points that have already been made. So I would recommend that as a good read for the audience. And specifically moving from Africa, and the question was LNG and how does it help the Africa, or I'll take it to an example that in Cheniere's corporate sustainability report in China. So China has got has a program called the Blue Sky Action Program, and in between 2016 and 2018, natural gas used in China increased by 30%. LNG consumption more than doubled to approximately 56 million tons per annum. And we as Cheniere supplied a lot of the LNG cargoes. But one thing that was really important is with greater use of natural gas, the air quality improved in the urban areas as many households switched from coal to gas heating. And by 2019, Beijing's air quality index, which improved by 30% over 2014. And those are real tangible results that are afforded by natural gas. And we believe with natural gas and current natural gas prices, it's not just an environmentally competitive product, but it is also vital as part of the energy transition.
Well, thank you, Fiji. So, Mark, picking up from what Fiji was just saying, what's the sort of more global perspective around that, perhaps?
Well, I mean, I think the answer is, I mean, what we're hearing here over and over again is that, whether you're thinking about this from the perspective of the pandemic or more broadly, we have a tremendous opportunity here, but we have to take it. And so to me, one of the things that I'm watching with some concern, frankly, is what lessons are people and countries and companies taking away from the pandemic. One of the dynamics that I can observe is a greater focus on, there's the potential for this to become an accelerant for what I observe to be a wave, a backlash against globalization, and more of a pulling in around the world of countries saying, okay, well, given what I'm seeing with the pandemic, that's going to play to concerns I already had building about my dependence on trade with other countries or my vulnerabilities and risks. I've actually published some research at Rice on energy security dimensions of the energy transition and how to think about it. And so I think it's not a done deal that the COVID pandemic will be a force for good in this transition. We have to choose to make it so. And I think that that's actually some of the comments that we're seeing coming in on the comments thread from a number of participants today is exactly that theme is, okay, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, thank you. That was a great comment from Hak Minas earlier. Energy transition will have two completely different scenarios, controlled and uncontrolled. The big question is how much political will is there to make energy transition? Or are we entirely reliant on market forces? So, we are a commercial industry, so we are very reliant on market forces. Obviously we play a role. What can we do ourselves, David, perhaps, on reducing our own carbon footprint? The utilization of solar and wind within our own operations. You kind of touched upon it earlier. Maybe a little bit more detail around those kind of innovations.
I think it gets very interesting how it's not just efficiency of systems, but then utilization of some of the technologies. Yeah, there's room for us to work out how to do that better. We're certainly playing with it on what's possible. Looking at, there are a range of options, and that's one of the hard business challenges is, where do you go? What do you do? But certainly there's room. I know we're looking at it in the Norwegian sector to combine renewables with the platforms, and we're even using the same technology as floaters to go out and run wind farms. So there's definitely lots of room. But the question I think for every individual is what am I going to do? What I think it gets down to personally, what's my position on this, and then how do I impact in my company? And so that's the challenge, because there's a lot of interest in the subject, and it's really people often get caught in this. Oh, I don't know if my leadership is interested, or I don't know if my industry is interested. The truth is, you need good business. If you can come up, I think for us, we set a challenge of what would it take to cut the cost of energy in half. What things could you do on the cost side, and that includes looking out at the alternatives to renewables that exist. There's room for new invention, and I think that if you can get that challenge and that right kind of thinking, there's opportunity behind it. And so I think that's one thing. And then I saw Halliburton is working on. They have a facility that they're developing for startups. I think we do really well at grabbing, harnessing, supporting startups, and that's something we should continue to do in this space. As people come up with these ideas, find ways to help them to succeed and survive and try some things. And I think that's the larger company piece, and also bringing business logic. I mean, that's the hardest part of all of these things. I know in our internal assessments, we have great ideas, but do they play out? And that's the opportunity, is to get the business minds in there combined with the technical people to say, what could we do? And I think there's a huge array. There's some things I can't talk about because we're working on them and they're not public. But I think that should be a question every company should be asking: is where's the opportunity here? What things can we do? What can I do with my operations? And there are simple tasks to do, but it's a culture of let's be careful with what we have. And I think it all has business logic behind it. I don't believe that it's just pushing the agenda. I actually think there's money in this, in a demand for more energy. I mean, as well as being careful with what we have. So,
yeah, really good message there. So it needs to be good business. That you need to build that groundswell. So what can people do personally to sort of influence their leadership in their companies?
Can I just say that one of the most interesting moves happening right now is in geothermal, where, when you talk to the geothermal people, they're like, "Oh, you're back," because they're the geothermal drillers are like, you guys weren't too interested for a while there, and some people went out of certain industry into there, but they need revolution. I mean, they need some serious. There's technology opportunity there that they're actually one of the better suppliers of energy, because they're consistent, and one of the problems with most of the energy supplies is they're not that consistent, but their costs are in trouble. And most people would have looked at it and gone, well, it's a low cost business, let's not go into it. But there's room in these places for innovation. And I think it's the same when we talked early on to wind applications, they all didn't want new things, which is what we'd heard. I mean, the story we hear is they just want, okay, these things are working, let's go with that, let's get the cost squeezed out of it. They really need innovation, and there's a ton of really good technologies. Some startups have been working on some interesting things, but I still think there's room for invention in these spaces. And we do subsea storage that is under development for oil and gas and other some fluids subsea, but I mean, it's perfect for energy storage and creating these mechanical battery type systems. And there's just so many things, hydrogen that get in. I mean, when you get into the technology, these are things we already do. Carbon sequestration. I mean, these are really easy steps for us to get into. And so I think it's a wide range out there of things that we can be doing and applying ourselves to. And I'm less a fan of government subsidy, not because I don't think that's a good idea or that's necessary for us to go here. I just think it causes bad behavior and avoids the business thing quicker. So, I mean, we look at, let's find other subsidy, like our own money, to go and do these things, because we've seen it before. We were in wind towers very early on, and came out of it because they were just squeezing the cost out of a very simple product. And it doesn't solve anything. You're not doing anything exciting. So I think there's a lot out there that could be done to look at the problems in the technology where there's quite a resistance to change already inside of the renewable space. So I like that.
Yeah, I think you're right there. So the market economics is a real driver. And, to Fiji's earlier point about flaring and, capturing methane rather than flaring, if the infrastructure's there, it has the commodity has a value, right? And to Mark's earlier points, I think you talked about CCUS, carbon dioxide having a price, which actually drives a market behind capturing and storing that or utilizing it. Mark, you made a point earlier, which I want to come back to in a minute, backlash against globalization. But I just want to turn to Josh for a moment. So Josh, Shell's done a lot of work and is doing really good work in terms of energy transition, not only in moving into new markets as a company, but also reducing its CO2 footprint in upstream using solar and wind to power its upstream operations. Can you say a little bit more about the Shell perspective and then a sort of broader perspective around those kind of innovations?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Niels. We've seen that it's possible to actually increase uptime and availability of our assets by introducing renewables and storage. And we've seen that in other operators as well. And we're also seeing across the patch a lot of big commitments being made. Shell is amongst them. I think we're making commitments around net zero sort of energy, net zero emissions from scope 1, scope 2. From all of our products by 2050, and reducing the carbon intensity of the products themselves that our customers use. So making a big commitment there around 65% reduction by 2050 and 30% by 2035. We also want to work with our suppliers and we want to work with our customers. So there's a commitment there. When we look at some of the other commitments that are being made, like for instance in OGCI, there's a number of companies, 12 companies that have come together that are making commitments to reduce emissions there, and there's coordinated sort of investments that are going on. So amongst the OGCI companies, there's 7 billion per annum of investments that are going into low carbon solutions. So also in the space around where are the opportunities, Shell's been looking at this. You need a deep electrification of the economy that has to be underpinned by low carbon power. We want to create a hydrogen economy, and hydrogen becomes very important to supply, for instance, high heat for industrial processes, and support some of the harder to decarbonize sort of things like transport of heavy trucks and ships. And then, of course, carbon pricing and advancing CCUS.
Oh, thank you, Josh. So we can have an impact, as you're saying, Josh, on oil and gas operations, we as an industry. People always maybe associate oil and gas with just thermal energy production. They kind of set aside all the oil and gas that goes into plastics and petrochemicals, which is an important part of the global economy. Mark, just to turn back to you briefly again, backlash against globalization, that obviously has a very big impact on energy transition and how economies can interplay and support each other in this whole process. Do you want to say a little bit more about that? That sort of can have a very big disruption on this whole transition.
Well, absolutely it can. And let's face it, energy has always been viewed as a strategic commodity. Concerns about, oil security, for example, go back over 100 years ago when Winston Churchill, before he became prime minister, when he was first Lord of the Admiralty, was worried about the security dimensions of switching the British Navy from coal to domestically produced coal to imported oil, for strategic advantage. And at the time, he decided that the answer was variety, diversification. And so again, these are not new topics, although I think that maybe we haven't thought through all the dimensions of the end of this from an energy transition perspective. I think in economics, the idea of comparative advantage and the benefits of a system that takes advantage of that is pretty well founded. And so, for most economists, I think if you think about a world where there is a pulling in and a reduction in, globalization and international trade, that tends to be more expensive, frankly. And so that, I think, is one of the risks that we face, is how to manage those pressures at the same time, along with all the other long list of problems that we've been trying to say that we need to manage at the same time.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, so it is a very complicated problem, and maybe where are we going to be in 2050? I think, Josh, you wanted to comment on that earlier. So, most of the economic forecasts end at 2040 or 2050. What are we going to look like as an industry in 2050, and what's the sort of typical energy engineer going to look like in 2050, and what's the future ahead of us?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I think one thing that's easy to say is that when we look forward, I don't think anyone expects the pace of change to slow down. With an increased pace of change and 30 years of runway time to 2050, things could look quite different in 30 years. So we spoke about already a bit of the amount of investment that's necessary, tens of trillions of dollars of investment to update our energy systems and the technologies that we need to put into place. I think big oil is going to have to adapt to become big energy. So we'll have to become more customer facing. We'll have to be basically more transparent with the public. So what does it mean for an energy worker in 2050? What might an ideal energy worker look like? It's something I wanted to discuss with other panelists as well. There are four things that came to mind for me. They have to be multi-skilled, have to have a circular mindset around circular economies. They have to be thinking about regenerative, not just net zero, and they have to be curious and innovative. And so I can touch on each of those briefly, but the multi-skilled, you have to be thinking about in the future, the tools we'll have to do analysis and make decisions will be far advanced from what we have today. So you can see an engineer being more of an orchestrator of many different AI models that are all providing insights, and they'll have to make sense of that, validate those things, and be able to provide useful intelligence to make an actual decision. When it comes to circular economy, it's incredible. Humanity, we use about 100 billion tons of material each year, and only 9% of that gets used more than once. So we're an incredibly wasteful species. So 67% of everything we mine, we manufacture, we move, it's completely lost after a single use. And the ideal future worker, they have to be able to think about things in an overall broad value chain view. So coming to this thing and thinking about it from the customer's angle, and also looking at every single waste stream as a potential feedstock to another process. And finally, the last two on regenerative, we've taken great strides in our industry to come to a goal zero mindset when it comes to safety, no harm to people, no harm to the environment, but we could go even further to make sure that any aspect of the ecosystem that we touch, we're not only avoiding harm, but we're also finding ways to regenerate those ecosystems. They need our help. And finally, around curious and innovative, we need people that can ask excellent questions. We'll have lots of ways of finding great answers, and we'll have ways of collaborating to find those answers. But first thing is to come up with a good question. And we need to always maintain a growth mindset, recognizing that we don't have all the answers, and we'll have to be collaborating with other sectors. So I think we'll have people that'll live longer, they'll have longer careers, and the useful life of skill sets may reduce from what it may have been for our parents or even some of us, 30 years to 2 to 5 years. So in parallel to delivering in your current role, people will have to find ways to upskill for the next move as well.
Thanks, Josh. Some really powerful messages there about future skill sets, and also very positive and forward-looking, I will say, about our industry and the role that it will continue to play. So sort of rounding off today's discussion, I mean, it's been a very broad discussion, because it's a very complicated discussion in itself, many sort of moving parts to the whole puzzle. Let's start with you, David, and go around the table. What are your sort of key messages, takeaways from today?
Well, it's more a position that I think in our future we need to. We're in a we're not in a transition, and we need one because everything is additive. We have more demand for energy. I'm hopeful that more surprises are down the road on energy production, and so that's where I'm at. Is there is opportunity for stronger and stronger cases of energy production that have less impact on our lifestyles, and so they can just help us to advance and help people around the world to advance. So there's still invention. That's where I'm at. I feel like if I was to put an analogy, it would be that we've got tapes and then records and now CDs, and this is all great, but no one's got me a few thousand songs on a small device, that I can listen to at any time. There's something in energy that is still out there to be discovered, and I know a lot of people. Well, physics or physics, but that's not been the case in many places. There's things we haven't thought of, things that we have to invent. So I still think there's a lot of room. I agree with that. Let's take care of what we have. I think our industry has always cared about changing and improving the environment of all people, and I think we're very moved by that. And I think we should keep being moved by that because we have changed the world as an industry, and we should continue to be those people. So I remain an optimist, and that there's great things for us ahead. There's some. We've been the energy supplier. We have changed the way we all live. And I think there's more to come out of us. And so I have a lot of hope for this group of people and the kind of things we can do for the world.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, David. That's really powerful. Mark, what are some of your final comments?
When I was at BP, one of my roles was to manage BP's annual statistical review of world energy. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's an objective data set that covers all forms of energy in every country. It's the longest running compilation of objective energy data in the world. And people would always ask me, well, what surprised you? And I always hated to admit it. But what surprised me was every year when you piled up the best objective data and looked at it, the message that came through was that markets work, where you give creative, innovative people the opportunity to respond to changing circumstances, i.e. changing prices in an economist's framework. They find unexpected creative ways of dealing with it. And so to me, the answer is to how do you unleash our single most important asset in this challenge? It's human creativity, and you unleash it by trying to use market-oriented forces to provide the platform for innovation, and you do that by having don't jump to picking the winner ahead of time. Have an open mind and a bit of humility as you approach these challenges, because the answer may very well come from someplace that you don't expect, and you would never get to it if you jumped right to picking the winners. And that's the kind of solution that a market is great at revealing. And we in our industry, we only have to think about the experience of shale to see a primary example of a world-changing innovation that nobody had on their list of things, except for a few stubborn people who kept at it and eventually cracked the nut.
Superb, Mark. Thank you. That's really great. Fiji, some comments?
Yeah, so closing comment. So future is something that it's not something that we enter, right? It's something that we have to create. And like Einstein said, he never thinks about the future because it comes too soon. And we are in a situation now where we got real challenges ahead. The dual challenge of providing affordable and clean energy is enormous. We know what the science says, and the industry has always stepped up to the plate in providing the right solution. We should treat all of this as a tailwind and not circle the wagons and be defensive. Find solutions. There's not a single solution. Renewables cannot answer it all. The drill, baby, drill does not work. So the ultimate solution will be where fossil fuels, especially natural gas, will have a role in a low carbon transition, along with renewables. There are a lot of engineering solutions that we mentioned that needs to be fixed. There are new uses of natural gas and oil that we've not even thought about, and that will be a separate forum. Think about how can we use natural gas other than combusting it? Can we use it as a feedstock to create something more useful? Example, graphene. The four industrial pillars of modern society are steel, cement, ammonia, and plastics. They all rely on natural gas and oil as a feedstock. So I don't want our colleagues within the industry to be fearful of the future, but take it as a challenge to create better. There are very low cost options, especially I'm very optimistic that we can come together and address the methane issue sooner than later. It is a lot of investment has happened over the past decade, and we need to build on that. The industry, if it takes on the challenge as a tailwind, we will come out on the right side by 2050.
Oh, superb, Fiji. Thank you. Josh, final words?
Yes. So first wanted to just start with some appreciation. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with all of you. I think this was a great conversation, and I hope people on the line enjoyed the dialogue. I certainly did. I think it's exciting to see the alignment, and it's exciting to see that people are thinking along the same lines. But the scale of the challenge is incredible. So we really don't have a chance of success here unless we engage and mobilize more people around the world in this effort and collaborate together. I think there's another big sort of theme that the Gaia initiative has identified here, that as an industry we do a lot of sort of talking, and we aren't great at engaging and listening to the public and thinking about our role in supporting their energy education as well. So I think that there's more of a role for us to help the consumer make balanced decisions about everything that they do in their day-to-day life, and I think that allows the consumer to make more informed decisions and do better things for that basically help trigger those market forces basically that were brought up earlier. So I just want to thank you, Nils, also for bringing us together.
Oh, thank you, Josh. No, it's been a real pleasure talking with all of you. It's an amazing subject, a complex subject. We barely scratched the surface. As Fiji mentioned, there's so much more to talk about. We never got as far as hydrogen. Unfortunately, that's going to be another SB Live. But, for me, the takeaway from this is that the world needs energy. Obviously, we need to be much more efficient about how we produce energy, so there's more energy for more people at lower cost. And we as an industry can affect change through collaboration, through engagement, market forces. That's what we're really good at. So, and just to many of your points earlier, nearly 40% of CO2 reduction can just be attained by efficiency. So it's just those are the things that we as an industry can really get our hands around and affect and deliver on. So to me, that's really powerful. So guys, thank you. Really, really good conversation. I just want to keep going, but we can't. We're out of time. So I'm going to say thank you to everybody. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to SP Foundation for making this possible through their sponsorship. Thank you, everybody. Really great conversation. So thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Yeah.
All from us.